We are going to be doing The Refugee Kid, Chapter 5 today. So, when I got home that night, I stayed up for as long as I could and I waited for my mum to come back from work. It's always 9:30 by the time she gets in on Mondays, because Mondays are late nights at the library. I'm supposed to be in bed by then, or she gets cross, but I didn't mind being told off, not if it meant that I could find out what had made the new boy a refugee kid, and why Mrs. Grimsey thought they caused trouble and took people's jobs all the time. On the bus home, Michael said refugee kids came from big tents in the desert, but then Josie said that no one was allowed to live in tents in England, except for when they were going on a camping trip, because it was against the law. And Tom said he'd heard of refugees on the television, but he couldn't remember why they were running away, and that England didn't have any deserts with lots of tents in it anyway. It was all very confusing, but I know my mum would know because she works in a library and libraries have books about everything. My mum is amazing, the most cleverest person that I know, even cleverer than Mrs. Khan. She works 2 jobs. She's a librarian during the week and on Saturdays she's a carer. She looks after people who can't eat or walk or remember things properly anymore, or who are too sick to live on their own. Because Mum has to work all the time, I don't get to see her lots, except on Sundays. Sundays are our special adventure days. We used to have them all the time with my dad. Whenever he had a day off, he would wake us up early, pack a lunch, and we'd set off in the car on an adventure, usually to the seaside or the safari park, or, if the weather was cold, for bowling or a movie. We can't really afford to do any of those things now, because when I was 6 years old, my dad died in a car crash. Sometimes I worry that I'm forgetting him, even though I miss him every day. But when I think hard and dive right down into the deepest part of my brain, he's still there. He was the funniest dad anyone could ever have. He used to be a carpenter and loved to build things out of whatever he could find. This is what my dad looks like in my memory. He always talked a lot more than Mum and loved to make up stories, but more than anything he loved listening to music. He had a huge music collection and he was always fixing the old-fashioned record player my grandfather had bought him for his birthday. He taught me how to play the big black discs on it and how to polish the large golden sound horn properly. Mum was going to sell it last year to help pay the bills, because apparently the older something is, the more money it's worth. Only for things, that is, not people. But luckily, my Uncle Lenny made her give it to me instead. Uncle Lenny's my mother's brother, and he is the best uncle in the world, even though he's married to my Aunt Christina, who I don't really like. And he has a son called Jacob who likes breaking things. He tries to visit us at least once a week, usually on his own. He's always asking me if there's anything I need. I love that about him, and I'll always love him for helping me keep Dad's record player. It's in my room now, but I never played music on it unless Mum is out of the house. She doesn't like me using it very much. I think it reminds her of when Dad used to dance around with her after he'd made a chair or a table he was proud of, and it makes her too sad. I had been playing one of Dad's old favourite records to stop myself from falling asleep when I suddenly heard Mum's key in the door. You can always tell that it's her key and not my Uncle Lenny's because it jangles the loudest. I quickly turned the song off and ran into the living room. "Well, hello there, Munchkin," said Mum. I could tell she was surprised to see me because her eyebrows had jumped up and disappeared into her hair. "What are you doing up so late?" "I can't sleep," I said. "Ah," she said, giving me a hug. She looked at me with a frown and touched my forehead. She always touches my forehead when she's worried about me. "You're not feeling ill, are you?" I shook my head. "Have you had supper?" I nodded. I usually have a tin of soup and a bread roll for supper on the nights Mum can't make it home in time for dinner. Mrs. Abby from next door comes and helps me make it when she knows I'm going to be on my own. She's old and she has trouble walking, but sometimes she makes me fish fingers if she's feeling well enough. My favourite soup is tomato soup because it reminds me of tomato ketchup. Ketchup is one of my most favourite things to eat in the whole wide world. You can add a dollop of ketchup to any dish that's not a dessert, and I'll bet you my pocket money that it'll make that dish taste even better. It's third on my list of top foods after chocolate and ice cream that comes in a cone from the ice cream van. "Well then," said Mum as she put the bags down, "let's see if a little hot chocolate doesn't put you to rights. Come and keep me company while I have some tea. I'm not that hungry today." I followed Mum into the kitchen and watched her get out the cocoa jar and switch on the kettle. And then before I knew it, I asked, "Mum, what's a refugee kid?" I didn't really mean to blurt it out like that, but sometimes my mouth does things my brain isn't ready for. Mum stopped what she was doing and stared at me. "A refugee kid?" she asked with a frown on her face. "Where did you hear that?" "At school," I said. "Someone called a new boy in our class a refugee kid." "You got a new boy in your class?" I nodded. "And Mrs. Khan didn't tell you anything about him?" I shook my head. "Only that he's called Ahmet and that he's never been to London before. I've been trying to make friends with him, but he doesn't talk to anyone, so I can't tell if he wants to be friends back." "I see." Mum fell silent. She poured the milk into the milk pan and she waited for it to heat up. I knew she was thinking about something serious, because she was rubbing her chin a lot. Mum only ever rubs her chin when she is about to say something serious. "Mum," I whispered. But Mum stayed silent, which made me start to worry. Mum usually answers my questions right away. Maybe what Mr. Brown had called the new boy wasn't a nice thing to call him at all. Okay, bye.